it's a shame to spend potentially tens of thousands of dollars to obtain a patent and then hang it on the wall and say, isn't that great? And not know what to do with the patent that they just got. That's a disaster for the entrepreneurial economy in my mind.
You are listening to Intangiblia, the podcast of intangible law, plain talk about intellectual property. Please welcome your host, Leticia Caminero.
Welcome to episode 3, season 2. Today we have a guest with a quite unique background. We're going to learn about his experience, his life, his profession, and most importantly, we're going to learn how to manage a patent, how to assert it, and how to profit from it.
My name is Curtis Droege. I live in the United States in the Lexington, Kentucky area. I'm 55 years old, and I'm a patent agent, and I run Tungsten IP as my full-time enterprise currently.
What drove you to this area, to this profession?
Sure. So it's a long story, but I think it's an interesting one. At least I think it is. I started off as a farmer and a mechanic, and while I was in high school and after high school, and that's all I wanted to do was just to be a farmer and a mechanic. I never thought about going to college, but when I was working as a mechanic, I had an injury, and I injured my back pretty severely, and so that caused me to rethink my plans because farming and mechanicking required me to be very physical, very, very strong and in good health. And I decided that after that injury that I needed to be a little more thoughtful about my career and think about something that I could do literally from a wheelchair if I had to. And so I had one of those moments where I thought, what can I do? And I had been very hands-on. I was very good at repairs, and my dad and I had designed farm equipment and built it in our shop through the years. And so I thought, well, I think I'm going to be a mechanical engineer. The thing was, when I made that decision to do that, and it was a decision, I was probably 20, 21 years old. And I couldn't even add fractions. And so when I talked to a local community college about starting in a pre-engineering program, they strongly discouraged me. They said, your math test scores are terrible and you don't stand a chance. And so instead of instead of just drowning in my ignorance at that point, mm-hmm. I went into a basic math class, a basic algebra class, and then an intermediate algebra class, and then a college algebra and trigonometry at the same time. And so then 12 months later, then I started into pre-engineering. And so in 12 months, I went from not being able to add fractions literally to mm-hmm. then taking calculus, chemistry, and physics all in one semester. And so that was quite a transition for a farm boy to make that type of a transition. But I did it and survived, mm-hmm. got better and better. And I finally learned how to learn. And,
oh, wow.
And that was just not something that I took seriously when I was in high school. I was busy doing all things hands-on and didn't really take learning seriously. It's not that I had the inability to learn, but I just didn't apply myself. And things that I cared about, I could learn quickly, but I just didn't apply myself in school. And so, that was my major transition into the engineering world. And actually, after the first year or so, I got pretty good and had very good grades through college. After junior college, I went to Missouri, University of Missouri in Rolla, which is now Missouri Science and Technology, and finished my degree and found a beautiful bride there, married her, and then took my first job with Lexmark out of college. Lexmark is a printing company in Lexington, Kentucky, and spent most of my career with them. And while I was there, I became an inventor multiple times. In fact, my first invention was, I was probably 4 months into my first job as an engineer. with Lexmark, and I came up with something. It was just a solution to a problem. And at that time, I didn't even know what a patent was, but I had really good mentors surrounding me. And two of these mentors said, "Hey, this is really a good idea. You need to file a patent on this." And I said, "Well, I don't really know what a patent is, but guide me through the process." And so they helped me. They helped me to improve the design. They both became co-inventors for my first patent. And that was quite a proud moment for me to become an inventor for the first time. And especially coming from where I came from, a very rural, hands-on type of a world. And so I became an inventor many, many times after that. I now have 25, I think. I kind of lose count after a while. Altogether, there's well over 100, I'm sure, of patents worldwide. And I took an interest in patent law while I was working with the patent attorneys on my own inventions. I learned there was such a thing as a patent agent, which at the time I didn't know anything about, where I could become a patent practitioner and prosecute patents before the USPTO without having a law degree. And that was a surprise to me. So I looked into it, and it was real. And so I talked to my vice president at the time and asked if he would fund my training to become a patent agent. And he said he would. And so I did that. And meanwhile, I was still working as an engineer with Lexmark and for even years after that. But I took progressively more responsibility for intellectual property matters at Lexmark. And my last 3.5 years with the company, I was the worldwide patent manager, which meant that I managed the invention process for the entire company. And I chose to do that from within the engineering department because the IP law department was always under a budget cut. And given the nature of my job, I could work from any place in the company and do that job as the patent manager. So I stayed in R&D. Well, and then at some point, the division that I was working in completely collapsed. And they decided to do away with that entire division of the company. And so my fortunes changed with Lexmark. I was laid off in 2012. But that was, another turning point for me. But it was actually the best thing that could happen to me because that forced me outside of the company that I grew up in and experienced the world in a lot of different ways. And so that's kind of the beginning. And from there, I did other jobs. I worked for another technology startup company. I should say I worked for a technology startup company. That was my first one. And my main job was to assert patents that they had. They suspected that their patents were being infringed. And so my job was to confirm that infringement and then work with outside counsel to assert those patents, which we did and which we won. And then I even worked for an insurance company that insured intellectual property of all types, patents, trademarks, copyrights, trade secrets. And I was an underwriter for them. And that was a lot of fun. And I did that for quite a while. I became the underwriting manager and then eventually became vice president of the company. But then there were opportunities for me to go on my own. And I had Tungsten IP, my current company. I had it open at the time that in fact, prior to going to work for the insurance company. And I evolved to the insurance job by actually reaching out to this company to see if I could do any overflow work for them. And they said, well, let's talk about that. Why don't you come by the office? And while you're at it, bring us your resume and let's talk about other things too. And so they made me an offer. And I was there with them for 5.5 years. Really a lot of fun work. And I realized in working as an insurance underwriter and working with literally hundreds of companies, I worked with at least 300 companies during that time. It's probably more like 500, but I just don't know how many companies, but I worked with a lot of good technology companies. And the thing that surprised me was very few technology companies did intellectual property well. And that gave me an appreciation for what I learned when I was at Lexmark, because we were very sophisticated inventors at Lexmark. We knew how to research our own patents before filing. We knew how to read patents. We knew how to have thoughtful debates with the patent attorneys when issues would come up. And we had a management process for vetting invention disclosures, for improving invention disclosures before they were filed, and then for working with the attorneys after the inventions were filed and they were being prosecuted. And I didn't have an appreciation for the training that I received at Lexmark until I was an underwriter for intellectual property insurance services and working with these hundreds of technology companies that didn't have that type of a background. And so that was an eye-opener for me. And in fact, that's one of the things that probably led me to write the book that we'll be talking about in just a few moments.
Sounds like impressive journeys. Having your life set out in a way that you thought it was going to happen, like working with your hands. From that, you had to transition to find a better opportunity. You have to overcome math, which is, for me, it's amazing. I'm a lawyer, so I profoundly hate math. Well, I shouldn't use the word hate, but there's no other way to describe my relationship with math. I mean, I can barely do like percentages. It's awful. And the fraction, for me, I don't understand what a fraction is. It's or how to add or no. Life is too short for me to know that. So I truly admire that you transition from not knowing to mastering it and to making sure that you achieve your dream. And it often happens that some people, they just focus on what you don't know instead of looking at your potential. They focus on you don't master math, you don't know this. It's like, no, but what are you capable of knowing or understanding of developing? So, right. So I'm glad that you didn't follow those advice and you actually went through what you wanted to do, that become an engineer and then a patent agent by association in a way, and then enriching our patent world with your work. So I'm very grateful that you had that journey, and I do believe that thanks to that journey, you have enriched yourself also in this book because you can see it from the perspective of a non-lawyer, non-legal thinking entity, because sometimes we can be a little bit too lawyery or can be too unnecessarily technical in certain ways. In your book, I mean, you do have the technicalities, you do have the processes, but it doesn't feel like an overwhelming law book that I read all the time, which is quite refreshing.
With the book, there is a section where I do talk about intellectual property. I have to do that just to set the background because I don't know what the reader knows. And so I would rather have the information there and they could skip a chapter if they choose to. Mm-hmm. I tried to keep it as brief and grounded in reality as I possibly can, because I still remember what it was like learning intellectual property on my own. It was basically self-taught. Other than a 6-day course, I'm self-taught. And it's a challenge. And inventors really do need to know and understand certain principles of intellectual property. But to your point, they don't need to get into the deep analysis of intellectual property that so many books and so many law treaties may choose to endeavor in. I'm not there to impress anybody. My job is to enable entrepreneurs to think about intellectual property as an asset to their company and give them just enough information to be able to communicate properly with their patent agents or patent attorneys, but to have confidence when they set out to invent something, that they can have confidence that they know what the journey is about and that they can go from conception to patent without any real surprises and with also having an objective in mind as to why they choose to file that patent. As you know, many inventors will file a patent just so they can hang it on their wall and have pride in the idea that they were an inventor. To me, that's a failure. That is a failure. Inventions exist And it's great to name yourself as an inventor, but it's a shame to spend potentially tens of thousands of dollars to obtain a patent and then hang it on the wall and say, "Isn't that great?" and not know what to do with the patent that they just got. That's a disaster for the entrepreneurial economy in my mind. And for startup companies, it's a disaster because they expect that patent to actually advance their startup company. And if it doesn't, then and they recognize, oh, I've just wasted all of this money of mine, or even worse, wasted somebody else's money that invested in their company. That's a failure. And so I try to teach not just the idea of patents, but why do you want the patent? And let's learn together how to think about patents as an asset to the company, and not it's not the patent is not the goal. A patent is a tool to enable you to be able to protect your market share. And so that's the perspective that I try to take with my book.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. IP is not an end in itself. You just don't have IP because you can or because you should. It has to serve a purpose that is compatible with your business or your endeavor that you're looking to achieve. On that note, should an entrepreneur with limited resources invest in a patent? And which factors assess in order to make that decision?
Sure. So should an investor invest in a patent? And the answer is, with anything, this is my standard answer with any type of a legal question. The answer is it depends. But more to the point, should someone invest in a patent? And I would say that if the entrepreneur requires market exclusivity with their design or their invention, and if the invention is truly novel, then I believe that they should invest in a patent. Those are both two very distinct criteria, having first market exclusivity and novelty. But in my opinion, those are the two key questions that should be answered before anyone files a patent. And with respect to how do we help them decide, the first thing to do would be, of course, a market analysis. Is there really a need for the product that I've invented? And why do I feel like I need market exclusivity? And if those two questions can be answered with confidence, where the answer is yes, I know that my product fits into a specific part of the market, and I need exclusivity because if I don't, then my product is going to be too easily copied, and I'm going to be working with competing designs in the marketplace and fighting them off all of the time. That would be a legitimate answer for arguing for market exclusivity. And so if you can answer that, then the next question would be to focus on prior art and to answer the question, is the invention truly novel? The only way to know that is to do a prior art search. And I believe that every entrepreneur needs to understand what prior art is and be able to search that on their own. This is something that can be outsourced, but there's too much to be learned by doing our own prior art searches. So for example, if an entrepreneur is searching for a cell phone case, for example, maybe they have an idea for a cell phone case. They learn that prior art can be anything from a patent or a product or a publication. And so they search competing products, and then they discover, oh, there's already a product out there like my invention. Okay, that means that their invention is not novel. They should not spend money on the patent. But when they're doing the research, they may also discover something else. It may be that they discover that, the reviews on the product that I was going to market are not very good. There's limitations with the design that I had in mind. And now they can they can basically do their own market research by looking at the reviews of the product they intended on filing a patent for. And then instead, they can file an improvement patent that improves on their original idea, and then market that improved product. So now they have a better chance of market success because they have done the research themselves and they learn how to pivot from one concept to another. And so I'm a strong proponent of every entrepreneur learning how to do that prior art search. Now, the example I gave was with products in the market, but it still applies when you're researching patents. And for something like a cell phone case, the entrepreneur is going to have to learn how to do a search for utility patents, but also design patents. And we haven't talked about the difference between those two. I don't know if your audience needs to hear that or not, but
yes, of course.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you some follow-up questions, like, can you define for us what is prior art?
Sure.
And which tools do you recommend for someone who is not necessarily knowledgeable of patent law?
So which tools do I recommend? I typically go to Google Patents a lot, and Google's taken over the world. We can't help that. And they do have a pretty decent patent search system that's available. It's got its limitations, and sometimes it may not find a patent when it should, but it's not bad. And it's a good first place to start for people that are just doing a search. But there's other tools that are available that are probably perhaps a little higher quality, and they're still free. One of those is called the Lens. And this is a prior art search tool out of Australia. And it used to be called the Patent Lens, but it's now called the Lens. And you can also search, other than patents, you can search using the same search string for non-patent prior art as well. And by the way, Google Patents also has a function there where you can search for non-patent prior art in their search engine too. So there's two examples. A third example is called Free Patents Online. Free Patents Online, you're able to set up an account even while it's still free, and to save your searches so you can go back to those and determine what was your search algebra at the time that you searched and that type of thing. So it has certain advantages. And so those are three good search engines that I would recommend someone learn how to use. Any of those is a good starting point. And so what was I'm sorry, I got so involved in that, in answering the question, I don't recall the other one.
Can you define what is prior art?
Yes. So prior art is a patent or a product or a publication that would render an entrepreneur's invention to not be novel. And so keep in mind that novelty is, and of course I know you know this, but speaking to your audience, novelty only comes once. And so an invention can only be an invention the first time. And for it to be an invention, it has to be novel and it has to be not obvious. In other words, not an obvious variant of something that already exists. And so it has to be novel. And that novelty is determined by whether there is a patent that teaches your invention, or whether there's a publication, which can be a research paper, or it can be an article in Popular Mechanics, or it can be anything in print, anywhere in the world. And so those are examples of prior art that can prevent one from obtaining a patent. It's really important, again, for the inventors to know how to search that so they can make that determination on their own. Oh, I should actually correct myself. I would argue that an inventor that thinks that they found something that is there's a discipline analysis process involved in determining whether something truly is prior art or not. So if there's any doubt in the mind of the inventor, they should get a second opinion. That's just a sidebar. And I've seen that before, where I've had inventors come to me and say, I don't think that we can patent this because of, well, there was still perhaps a lot of invention left. Maybe the prior art they found was something related to one aspect of their invention, but there might have been 3 or 4 aspects to their invention that would still be novel. And so having that second opinion can be very helpful.
Intangiblia, the podcast of intangible law. Plain talk about intellectual property.
And with that in mind, so we have an invention that is novel, it's non-obvious, and it has industrial applicability, the last condition that we didn't talk about, that it could be applied to any industry. How do you secure a patent? What is the path or the most likely path that we will need to follow in order to secure a patent? Is there a bulletproof way to get a patent, or is always a gamble when you apply for one?
It's always a gamble. So here's the path, and we'll talk about the probabilities as we go. So the path for obtaining a patent, in my mind, is that the inventor is responsible for writing the invention disclosure. And it might be a 3 or 4 page summary of their invention, maybe including some pictures or napkin sketches or something. And then hopefully they would engage the services of a patent attorney or patent agent to help them to write a patent application. But in my mind, the inventor is responsible for the first step, to document as much as they know, and then to engage the services of someone that can help them to write either a provisional application or a non-provisional application, or a design application if it's something that's ornamental. And then work with the patent attorney or patent agent to file the patent application. And then there's a waiting period. You may wait 2 to 3 years before they ever hear back from the patent office. And it can be unnerving while that time is going by. And it can just take some lengthy time period before they hear back from the patent office. When they do, it will almost always be like a punch in the gut, because the patent examiner will likely say, your claims are not novel for these reasons. These certain claims are obvious for these reasons. And but it will be what is called a non-final office action. At that point, it's really important to understand the validity of their arguments and to work with someone that's very experienced to draft a response to the patent office, and work with the inventor on that response, because that response in part may include canceling of claims. If the examiner is not right, if they're incorrect in their analysis, then it's up to the patent attorney to point that out. But the patent examiners are pretty good, and they may identify prior art for, say, claim 1 of your patent, which is typically your broadest claim, and they may identify prior art that says your patent is not novel for certain reasons. And so then between the inventor and the patent attorney, then you would work together on deciding, well, is claim 2 adequate? If that has been allowed, then maybe you're going to have to get used to the idea that you're not going to get the broadest claim, but a more narrow claim 2, which was likely a claim that depends from claim 1. And so there's this negotiation process that happens between the inventor and the patent attorney that's based 100% on the feedback that's been received by the patent office. It's important to understand that the patent prosecution process is an adversarial process, which means it's the job of the patent examiner to tell you why you cannot have a patent. And if an inventor can write and file their own patent application, but when it gets to that point, that's when it gets very real. And many people that write their own applications will make mistakes. And all of those mistakes will become readily apparent once they get the office response back from the examiner. And their inexperience will be a real problem when it comes time to respond to the patent examiner. And that's not the time to be doing it on your own. And so having a good patent attorney or patent agent that's got a lot of experience in working with the office is extremely important, because keeping in mind that the job of the patent examiner is to keep you from getting a patent unless you can overcome all of their arguments. So that's a very lengthy process. You may not hear back from the patent office for 2 years, and then you get a first response, and then you respond back to that. Then you might get a second response. And as I understand, the statistics are that about 50% of patents will get a final rejection, which means that at least some of the claims of the patent will not be allowed, period. And then the inventor is left with a choice. Do they continue arguing through a request for continued examination, or do they appeal if they feel like that the examiner is just not understanding it? And all of those are questions that need specific guidance from someone that understands the process. Again, like a patent attorney or a patent agent. And so just that prosecution time period from the time that you first hear back from the patent office to the time that you might receive a patent, maybe yet another year. And so it's a very lengthy process. It's an adversarial process, and it's also very expensive. But that is the process. Now what I described is for a utility patent application, which is also called a non-provisional patent application. The process is a little bit more predictable and much shorter if it's a design patent. But for a non-provisional or utility patent application, that typically is a process. It's not uncommon to see from the filing date of a patent to the final issue date to be easily 3 years.
And what is the difference between a design patent and a utility one?
So a design patent protects the ornamental look of an invention. An example, I have one of my smoke detectors sitting on my desk to remind me to replace the batteries and put them back up on the ceiling. Someone can obtain a patent for the look of that smoke detector that will mount on the ceiling. It might have certain curved shapes to it. It might have a rectangular shape with certain accent shapes to it. But the look of that smoke detector can be protected with a design patent. A classic example of a design patent is the Chevrolet Corvette. Beautiful, beautiful car. There are plenty of design patents that protect the look of a Corvette. And so that's an example of a design patent. Utility patents or non-provisional patents, those protect the functionality of something. So if I use the smoke alarm example, the look would be protected by a design patent, but it might be the electronics or the sensors that have a very specific function to them. It is capable of sensing both smoke and carbon dioxide. That would be the subject matter that you would typically see in a utility patent.
Thank you for clarifying that. What do you do, or what should one do when you find out that someone is infringing your patent? After going through that lengthy process, finally securing your patent, and then you learn that someone else in the market is profiting from your invention in an unlawful way.
Sure.
What should you do in that moment?
Well, the first thing is to get the right mentality. I've dealt a lot with litigation through the years, and the first mistake that most inventors make when it comes to infringement decisions is that they start thinking like a schoolyard bully instead of a businessman. Their first reaction is, they're infringing my patent. I've got to go get them. I've got to make them pay. That's the wrong thought process. The right thought process to think is to determine, how much is it going to cost to take action against this person or this company? And how much am I going to lose if I don't take action? And you make a business choice based on that. Sometimes if someone is infringing your patent, it's a small company that's not likely going to be chipping into your market share by very much. It might be that you just let that go and not assert the patent, because patent assertion or patent litigation can be very, very expensive. But fortunately, that litigation process comes in stages and must include a patent attorney. And this is an area where I should point out to all of those listening that patent agents cannot help you when it comes to patent litigation matters. That's something that only patent attorneys can help you with. And so the first step is to contact a patent attorney, probably multiple patent attorneys, get an idea of how they charge, what their rates are. Patent litigation attorneys can have rates that range from $300 an hour to well over $1,000 an hour. And some types of cases they won't take. If there's not a lot of money in controversy, and if they are asked to take it on contingency, where they're not getting paid by the hour, billed every month, then there may be several attorneys that say, "This is a case that I don't want. Have a good day." And so it's a challenge sometimes just to find the right attorney that will work with you based on your volumes, your revenue, how much money is at stake. Is the infringement going to result in potential award damages of $5 million, $10 million, or is it going to be a small amount of only $10,000, $15,000, and you don't even have the money to pay the attorney for the small case? It's a challenge to get good representation in those scenarios. But as a minimum, the inventor that holds that patent that's being infringed can at least send a notice of infringement to the infringer and make them aware of a patent and demand that they stop shipping that product. Now, that doesn't come without risk. It could be that the one that's infringing may file a declaratory judgment that basically triggers you into litigation in the district that they're interested in hearing the litigation. When it comes time to assert one's patent, it's a business decision 100% of the time. And the inventor that holds that patent has to know what they're doing and to make a decision without any emotion of any kind to make the right decision. Now, that said, 80% of the lawsuits that are asserted by small inventors will be emotionally driven. Mm-hmm. I've seen it. I've seen it many, many times, probably literally 50 times. I've seen emotionally driven decisions to assert their patent against a competitor. And only of those 50 times, maybe 5, at the most 10 of those made sense from a business decision. By the time they took into account the risk of a declaratory judgment that would work against them, or the amount of money that they would spend with a law firm, or the amount of time that they would be distracted from their business by pursuing this competitor. All of these things are factors and need to be thought about very carefully. And so the first step, though, of course, as I mentioned, you have to, if you choose to do anything at all, the first step is to notify the infringing party and give them a chance to no longer offer that product. But it may be that they feel like that they want to fight you a little while, and it may be that you have to assert your patent in court against them. And so it's patent litigation is something to be taken very, very seriously. And but that's the point of having the patent in the first place, is getting to that point. You don't get a patent just to hang on your wall and to be proud of. You get a patent so if someone infringes, you can do something about it. The more that the inventor understands about litigation and the risk of litigation, I feel like the better inventor they become. The sooner that an inventor can start thinking like a businessman about their invention, about whether to file a patent, and then whether to assert, the better. Because again, this is all high risk stuff. The likelihood of getting a patent in the first place, I don't think that I mentioned this, but it depends on the art unit. But for many of the technologies, the common mechanical and electrical technologies, the likelihood of obtaining a patent at all is probably on the order of 60 to 80%. If it's a business method patent or artificial intelligence, then the likelihood of obtaining that patent is probably more like 20%. Let's say that you've taken your gamble and you put all of that time and money into getting a patent. You're actually gaining market share. You've developed a business around the patent, and now you have an infringer. You still have to keep your cool, and you still have to make very good decisions as to whether you're going to be asserting that patent or not. And if you choose to do that, you need to go into it with your eyes wide open that you're now going to be engaging with at least tens of thousands of dollars at stake, if not hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars at stake as you assert that patent.
Yeah, just to keep in mind that it's a business decision, and it is not just the passion behind this person is doing something wrong to me. I need to make this right. it's hard to divide because usually entrepreneurs see their enterprises are the babies and the innovations are the babies. So it's a tough decision. I totally agree with you that you need to be, you put your business hat on and think with that one, not with the passion or the sentiment behind your invention.
Yes, I've seen that go wrong so many times. And in fact, I've seen companies go broke by asserting their patents.
Wow.
And that's a terrible thing, but it's happened and it will continue to happen. While they're losing market share, they're also spending a huge amount of money hoping to get a fair hearing from a court that there's an infringement, and they're hoping to get the court to see it their way. But it's the problem with patents is utility patents are the scope of protection is words. It's not a picture of the product, and for utility patents at least. And those words can be interpreted many different ways. And you would be surprised at how many ways that the words of an entrepreneur's patent can be interpreted until you actually assert that in court. That's one thing. But then the other part of it is that if you assert that patent in court, then the opposing party, the one that's infringing, is likely going to spend a lot of money trying to undermine the credibility of the patent to find some prior art reference that was ignored by the patent office when they examined it, and to use that prior art against the inventor to say that the patent should have never issued in the first place. The patent is invalid because this prior art was not found. A decision had never been made on this prior art. We're arguing that the patent is invalid. And
that's the typical defense. Defense. You accuse me of infringing. I accuse you of invalidity. So that's the common conversation how it goes.
And sometimes they're right. The opposing party may be correct in their analysis, or they can at least make a strong enough argument that the judge believes them. And even though it may be that they're wrong, but the likelihood of asserting a patent and that patent surviving, all of the claims surviving in that patent, and the inventor actually getting a damage award for the damages caused by the infringing party, the odds aren't, I don't know what the odds are, but they're not 100%. And so that's a risk that the inventor takes as well. It could be that they assert their patent in good faith that they're going to be compensated for the damage caused by the infringer. And the final result is they may get an invalid patent as a result and no damages back. Yeah. And meanwhile, they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on attorneys and court fees and a loss to their business while they're diverting their attention away from the business and having nothing to show for that. So it's not bulletproof path forward when an inventor decides to assert their patents. And that's why the most important skill set at that point is having a calm business head and being able to make decisions based on the specific facts that their very competent patent attorney can help them with. And
on the other side, how not to infringe someone else's patent? What steps should we take, or what should we avoid?
I've been in this situation many times because when I was employed with Lexmark, there were thousands of patents that were always in force. And when I was there, inkjet printing, which was the field that I worked in, inkjet printing was relatively new. And so the technology was growing and maturing, and patents being filed literally by the thousands per year among all of the competitors for improvements to an inkjet cartridge or improvements to an ink printer. And so we did spend a lot of time studying competitors' patents and trying to design around those. So that's the first skill set, I believe, that is important for an inventor to have if they're going to be inventing in a technology area where there are potentially other competing patents. If that patent is still in force, in other words, the patent is not expired, then, and in fact, that's part of the skill set too, is to just be able to calculate the expiration date of the patent. And sometimes it's not trivial. So if the patent is not expired, then how do you design around that? How do you interpret the scope of of protection that the competitor has based on that set of words that's embodied in a claim. And it's a very detailed analysis, and I'm sure it's beyond the scope of what we should talk about here. But it's a skill set that every entrepreneur should seek to obtain. I try to speak to this at some length in my book to be sure that that skill set is at least recognized by the inventors. It's definitely not a complete body of work to completely teach someone how to to design around someone else's patent. It will hopefully get them started on the right path to designing around other patents by thinking about each and every claim element. And the basic analysis is that for there to be infringement, of course, the patent still needs to be enforced. But the second part of the analysis is that for there to be infringement, the design around should not satisfy each and every claim element of the competing claim. If there's any one claim element that is not satisfied, then there is no infringement. You might have multiple claim elements that define and further define what is the scope of protection that has been allowed to the opposing patent. And let's say that one of those claim elements is that it's in the shape of a triangle, but then you design it to be a square, but still maintain the functionality. All the other claim elements are the same, but instead of your invention or your design around being a triangle, it's a square instead, then that patent would not infringe, or that invention or that design would not infringe. And so it's that basic analysis that where we would understand that each and every claim element must be infringed for there to be infringement of the entire claim. So that's the starting point for that. But it does get into a lot of other aspects as well, like doctrine of equivalence and other detailed analyses.
Yes, you can talk a bit about those two doctrines, so to have a broader understanding.
Sure. So a doctrine of equivalence recognizes that a design around may do the same thing, have the same functionality achieved in the same way as the claimed invention, but it may be slightly different, but it still accomplishes the functionality in such a similar way that the courts may argue the competing design infringes under the doctrine of equivalence.
So finally, can you tell us what is a patent strategy? And please give us some examples.
My perspective on patent strategy is that for every patent application that is filed, there really needs to be a strategic objective that is served by that patent filing, keeping in mind what a patent actually does and does not do for the patent owner. The patent provides exclusivity to the patent owner or to the licensees that the patent has enabled. It is possible to license a patent to others, but aside from that, the exclusivity provided by a patent is to prevent others from making, using, selling, importing into the country where the patent exists the claims of that finally issued patent. And so that's what a patent is intended to do. A patent does not protect necessarily a product unless there's a patent for that entire product. A patent will protect the invention as defined by the claims, which can be a subset of the product. And in many cases for high-tech technology applications like a cell phone or a complex electronic device, it's very unlikely that there will be one patent that will protect that entire product. It's going to be a subset of that. So keeping in mind what a patent is and is not, that it provides exclusivity for a limited time for others to copy that design in some form. With that in mind, a patent strategy should involve the business strategy for that entrepreneur's company, help to serve the business strategy in a way that a patent can serve that business strategy by, for example, let's say that a business strategy is going to be to enter a certain specific market niche in a certain way. And the patent strategy then should help the entrepreneur to achieve that specific business goal given the constraints of what the patent can and cannot do. And so if the goal is for a business to enter a specific niche market, then the patent strategy should be designed in such a way to preserve that niche market from keeping competitors from coming in and taking over that niche market, that perhaps on the day that they chose to pursue that, maybe that niche was not even noticeable on the market, but it was noticed by the inventors first, so they patented products. So once they entered that new market niche, then they're protected from others coming in and taking that niche away from them. So the patent strategy starts with understanding the strengths and weaknesses of a patent, and it starts with understanding what your business strategy is. And then the patent strategy should serve the business strategy. That's different, I think, than what you'll read in a lot of books on patent strategy. Patent strategy typically is you should file in these countries, or you should take this certain approach to get your patents fast. Those, in my mind, are not strategies at all. Those are just tactics. It's just tactics to accomplish a specific goal, but it doesn't serve a broad purpose that enables the business to achieve what the business is all about. I think perhaps because I came from a different perspective on patents, starting with my hands-on talents, evolving as an engineer. And by the way, we haven't mentioned this, but I've also been involved in several startup companies, both consulting to startup companies and also being a co-owner of several startup companies myself. I'm very careful about how we spend our patent dollars. And I will always recommend that we spend the hard-earned patent dollars after we understand our business strategy, and if that patent can help us achieve that business strategic goal. And if we can do that, then I'm all in favor of filing that patent to serve that business goal.
And what would you say to the entrepreneur that is sitting in his desk, looking at his invention, her invention, or the invention, and trying to figure out what to do next? What will be the very, very first step that you will give to this person that is on the brink of trying to implement its innovation?
Again, I think that the first thing is to start with the market. They need to understand the market, because the patent, even if they obtain the patent, that patent will not have any value to them if there's no market that exists, or if the market maturity curve is passed. So one example that would be buggy whips. Used a lot back in the days when we used to ride horses. But if someone comes up with an improved buggy whip, they're probably not going to be able to enjoy a large enough market to make that a full-time business. They might be able to patent the buggy whip, and it would only be an improvement because of all of the prior art that exists to begin with. So it's only going to be a narrow niche patent. And if they try to develop a business around that improvement to a buggy whip, it's not likely going to be something that scales to be a multi-million-dollar business. It can be a hobby level business, but it's not going to be a multi-million-dollar business. And so they have to think about the market first, and where do they want to be spending their time? If they want it to be a multi-million-dollar business, but it's a limited market, then maybe they should not file that patent at all. But if it's, for example, if it's an improvement to cooling a computer processor, with less volume, without fluid flow, without all the other limitations of how you cool computers these days, well, that might have a huge opportunity for server farms, where the biggest problem for a server farm is not the computing power. They can just buy more computing power, but now they have to spend a lot of money cooling the air volume where all of these servers are housed. And so having a computer processor that can run at 30% less heat than something the state of the art that's in the market. Now that's an invention that can scale very quickly. And so thinking about the market first and thinking about the market opportunity before you think about the patent, I think, is always a good first step. But if it passes a market test, then again, the next step is to at least give a cursory look of whether that that invention has been patented, or there are competing patents or competing products, that is, that would undermine the patentability of that invention. If both answers come back favorable, that there's a favorable market and that there is a favorable patent landscape where it's likely that they might obtain reasonably broad claims for their patent, that's the point at which I think it makes sense to start thinking about filing a patent.
So the first thing would be educate yourself first on the market that where your invention will be more likely to be in. And after that market assessment, then you try to find if it's truly a novelty, what you have created.
Both of those questions, in my mind, should be answered before there would be a decision to spend money on a patent application.
Yes, for sure. Definitely.
And then, of course, recognizing that the process of obtaining that patent is not a certainty. Mm-hmm. There's probabilities that are associated with that based in part on the technology and the amount of money that it takes to go from patent application to issued patent. It can vary widely. And so, having that discussion with their patent attorney to determine what not only is the cost of filing the application, but what in their mind would be the total cost of obtaining that patent with all of the probabilities built in. That, for example, maybe there's a request for continued examination that needs to be filed in 20% or 30% of the cases. How is that going to be affecting the total cost of the patent? What if we have to go through an appeal process? How would that affect the total cost of the patent? And all of those scenarios should be in the mind of the inventor before they make a decision to file. So having that good, thoughtful conversation with their patent attorney before spending the first dollar on the patent application is very helpful because I've seen many inventors be surprised that they have spent $20,000 or even $30,000 to obtain a patent. And unfortunately, I've seen those same inventors where they finally got a patent in hand and not quite sure what to do with it next, where they've got this idea that if they get a patent, then the market will come to them. And
everything is going to happen by itself.
The odds are almost zero that would happen to them.
Yeah, it doesn't apply to build it and they will come.
That is correct.
Idea.
That is correct. I do think that many inventors feel like that if they get a patent, then somebody's going to know about it and somebody will call them and pay them $1 million. No. And by the way, those that pursue a patent with licensing in mind, and I'm on several Facebook groups related to inventing, and this question comes up probably 5 times a week. Mm-hmm. I've got this idea and I want to get a patent and I want to license it. Somebody tell me what the process is. The likelihood of someone being willing to license your patent depends on a lot of things. There are certainly companies that are interested in doing that. And there are good companies that help advise inventors if that's what they want as a licensing agreement. And I don't want to take anything away from those companies, but it is, if you look at 100 ideas or 1,000 ideas, just to get a statistically significant number in front of us. And when you look at the number of license agreements that will come out of that 1,000 ideas, assuming that someone files at least a provisional patent application and then seeks a license for their idea, I don't know what the number is, but I would be sure that out of 1,000 ideas, that there would be less than 50 license agreements that would come out of that original 1,000. That's not very high odds. And there's a lot of things that can go wrong with a scenario like that. For example, one thing that can go wrong is that someone would be ill-advised for their technology improvement. Somebody may be ill-advised to file a design patent. And then someone may try to license the design patent for a technology feature, not for an ornamental feature. And no one's going to pay you for that because that design patent is essentially valueless. And to put it bluntly, a complete waste of time and a complete waste of money. And so that's one example of how things go wrong for novice inventors that are looking for that licensing bug. That's the odds are not high although with the right guidance, the odds can be improved. It's not a bad game to play for someone that may be interested in trying to get license deals. Maybe they have an improvement to a squirt gun, for example. They could file a provisional patent application for that squirt gun and then try to find someone through the help of good people that know what they're doing to find a license for that improvement to a squirt gun. And it might work out. I'm familiar with a patent that was, believe it or not, it was a fake pumpkin and was designed so people could carve a pumpkin for Halloween without all the mess of a real pumpkin.
Well, I will pay for that.
And when I first heard about that, I thought, what a silly idea. Until I realized pumpkins are very seasonal. They can get damaged in shipping. They can rot. Mm-hmm. And some people don't like, they're not used to getting their hands dirty like that, reaching inside and pulling out all the ick from inside of a pumpkin.
Yeah.
Somebody invented an improvement to a pumpkin. And through an attorney friend of mine, they got a very lucrative licensing agreement for this fake pumpkin. And it took me a while to process that. Mm-hmm. Before I realized, I guess that really was a good idea. I probably, even if I came up with the idea, I would have dismissed it and probably never filed a patent application because I just come from a different mindset.
Yes, of course.
It's okay to get your hands dirty once in a while. But that's an example of where it can work. I think that the inventors were advised by my attorney friend, which is a very competent attorney, from the very beginning, where they could they probably knew that there was going to be a market. Maybe they had a connection in the market before they sought a license agreement. Yeah. And there's several opportunities for things to go well if you're advised properly from the very beginning. But there's a lot of places it can go wrong if all you do is come up with an idea, file a patent application for it, and then hope somebody's going to come beating on your door with a checkbook in their hand. It's not likely going to work out very well.
It's not by magic. It's not going to happen like just, okay, I have a patent and everything's solved. Now I can just sit back and enjoy success. Right. It's not like that. No. But I would love to get that pumpkin because I'm a city girl. So for me, getting my hands dirty, I will do it, but it's debatable. I will eventually do it if I have to, but you would do it, but you'd rather not. And if there was a low-cost alternative, you're all for it, right? Yeah, I'm happy to do it, and to imagine, I'm not eating the pumpkin, so it's a waste. Well, that's true. That is true. So it took me. I don't know. I think when I heard that story, it took me overnight to process that before I finally realized, maybe that was a good idea. So it's just interesting. It's funny because it's from the different mindsets. That's how it is, and that's where a lot of inventions come from. It comes from just very different ways of looking at a problem. And for me, there's certain problems that I'll never recognize, but others will identify it to be a problem that is also the same problem, maybe for millions of others. That I won't notice. I'm a pretty good inventor, and I'm a very disciplined inventor, and I'm very objective in my inventions. But oh my goodness, there are so many good ideas that I will never think about because I just have a certain paradigm. I have a certain mentality. And so that's the cool thing about the business of inventing is that it doesn't require someone that's a patent agent to be the inventor. It doesn't require an engineer to be an inventor. It doesn't require somebody that can read and write to be an inventor. Anyone can be an inventor. That's beautiful. It's true. That intellectual property doesn't discriminate against who is behind it. It's assess the invention itself. Inventing is kind of the great equalizer. There was a gentleman up in Holland, Michigan, and I almost went to work for this company. His last name was Prince, and the name of his company was called Prince Incorporated. And he was the inventor of the vanity mirror that came out on Cadillacs back in the early 70s, maybe the late 60s. And it was a very simple idea where on the passenger side,
You could rotate your sunshade. That's not the right word for it. Your sun visor. Rotate your sun visor down, and then flip a little lid up, and that lid would expose a mirror. And then when you flip that lid up, it would also turn on a light, where someone that's riding in the passenger seat could check their makeup or to check their hair before they get to their destination. They called that a vanity mirror. And that was invented by Mr. Prince. And that became the beginning of him starting a company where he sold that to the auto manufacturers. He set up a manufacturing line to manufacture that. And when I interviewed for a job there as an engineer before I became a patent agent, and he had developed that into a multi-billion-dollar company and had done extremely well. But when I was there, it had evolved well beyond sun visors and that type of thing. They did complete automotive interiors, steering wheels, ceiling panels, floorboards, seats. They designed all of the automotive interiors. And I remember walking through, they had their own showroom of cars with these different interior concepts that were fully designed and available for people from the automotive industry to come and visit and look at some of the concepts. And I got to look at those cars and the different concepts that they were entertaining. And it was just absolutely impressive. Very, very impressive. But it all started with a single idea and somebody that had the courage and the initiative to take that idea and take a chance on getting a patent, and then take a chance on working with the automotive manufacturers in Detroit. And he did extremely well. And that's kind of the American dream.
Yeah.
For many people, that American dream does start with an idea that results in a patent, that results in exclusivity of a market niche. And that's really cool.
That sounds like the best success story regarding a patent and how something so unique and something so specific as a vanity mirror, yes, which I use all the time. And I'm very thankful for that invention.
Yes. And when you think about all the things that we use in our life with our cell phones, or, even our drinking cups, I've got a Yeti drinking cup that's on my desk. And that's a relatively new, it's an old technology that's been reimagined. And there are a few patents for that drinking cup. I've looked them up. It doesn't give them an exclusive right to the entire concept of a double-walled drinking cup. But the way that they've reimagined the product, they've been able to create a very lucrative market niche that's extended beyond cups now to coolers and even cases, camera cases, I think, they're in those kind of markets now too, if I'm not mistaken. And so that again started with just a different way of thinking, and then obtaining what patent coverage you could obtain and then building a business around it.
Yeah, there's so many great patents. I don't know if you know this, but there's like a little handle that you carry around, and you can use that handle to put on a table so your handbag doesn't touch the floor. Oh, I don't know if you've seen it. It's like, it has like a type of weight. So you put it on the table, and then it has a little hanger. And from there, you put your handbag and it doesn't touch the floor, which is a problem that all women have. Right. And especially in my culture, putting your handbag in the floor, it's bad luck. It means that you're going to run out of money.
Oh, that's.
Yeah. So when I learned about this, okay, I need like 7 of this now.
And that's a very simple idea, but still could probably benefit from a patent to satisfy, their market niche and to give them protection so they can keep the competitors at bay.
Yeah, exactly. So Curtis, thank you so much for your time. Your book, Patent Strategy for Entrepreneurs, can be found on Amazon. Only one click buy. That's how I did it. And you have it on your Kindle. But where can we find you? Where can we contact you?
So you can contact me through my website. I have tungstenip.com. Tungsten is spelled just like the metal, Tungsten IP. And that's one website. I have another website that I'm developing for an online product I'll be launching and that website is called inventiongarage.com. I'll be launching educational products for entrepreneurs that want to learn more about the invention process and about what they can do as an entrepreneur to improve their chances of succeeding in the patent marketplace. And so I'll be providing educational products through inventiongarage.com. So either of those, and then my email address will be listed on both of those websites. But I'll also give that to you. Curtis at inventiongarage.com will get right to me. If anyone wants to talk about their invention, I would welcome anyone to send me an email, and I'd be happy to speak with them.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Curtis. Thank you for your time, and hope everything is well back home.
Thank you. And I appreciate the time.
Yes, me too. It was a great talk and very enriching. So I learned a lot from this talk. Thank you.
You're kind. Thank you so much.
And so we come to the end of our episode. See you next Tuesday with a new guest and a new IP topic. Goodbye from Washington, D.C.
Thank you for listening to Intangiblia, the podcast of intangible law. Plain talk about intellectual property. Did you like what we talked today? Please share with your network. Do you want to learn more about intellectual property? Subscribe now on your favorite podcast player. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Visit our website www.intangiblia.com. Copyright Leticia Caminero 2020.